What's happening, guys? Today I'm going over all my bluefin tuna fishing rod and reel setups. Been getting a ton of questions about what I use and when, so today I'm going to break it down for you. A couple rules of thumb that I like to follow and how I'm going to use a certain rod and reel for the technique or tactic that I'm trying to catch those bluefin tunas. If you're new to the channel, I'm Zach. I do Obseadian Fishing Podcast, post these videos on YouTube as well. And this is just my experience. I've been living in San Diego for about 10 years. Before that, I grew up in North Carolina, doing everything from commercial fishing on the Outer Banks for bluefin tuna all the way to marlin fishing tournaments, everything offshore. Worked on 42-foot sport fisher as a mate and a 60-foot Jarrett Bay as well. So this is just kind of like what has worked well for me. This is not the only way that it can be done. I bring a little bit of East Coast flavor to the West Coast. I kind of use the best of both worlds for what I like. So we'll go ahead and jump into it. My first one, I've got a Speedmaster 25. I've got 500 yards of 80-pound Power Pro. I use the metered Power Pro because it's marked every 25 feet, so it's easy for me to see like yellow to yellow. Yeah, I'm at 100. There's different brands of braid that you can use. I strongly recommend metered, or at least take your line out in the yard and mark it at 100, 200, 300 feet. If you don't have meter line, it's definitely okay. Just, like the easy way to do it is one stripe for 100, two stripes for 200, and three for 300. I'd probably go to 400 or 500 just in case you get a tangle, you break off, you don't want to be out of the game or not knowing where your jig is at when you are dropping down. So that's the line. For the reel, Speedmaster 25, you can definitely use a variety of reels. It's just what I like. I usually stick with Shimano products. It was a good reel for the price. And for the rod, I've got a Shimano Travala, extra heavy, 5'8", conventional. I do like the shorter rods. I think they're easier to maneuver. The only kind of downfall with them is if you're like working your way around the bow. Some boats have a really long bow and you can't walk all the way up to it. So that is one downfall of a shorter rod. Something to take into consideration, but I think for the maneuverability, I definitely would rather use a shorter stick, and that way I'm more comfortable fishing. I go with lightweight over power. I have a Penn Carnage rod, and it's just super heavy, awkward. I didn't like it. I'm probably going to end up selling it, but I went back to my Shimano Travala after using that big 7-foot Carnage that was super heavy. When I'm going to use this rod and reel, it's going to be for dropping a jig at night. You could also rig a sinker rig, something like that on it. Anything where you're fishing straight up and down, right? This is like the power stick. I also have one more, but this is pretty much the meat and potatoes of bluefin fishing. Most of my bluefin tuna have been caught on the jig at night, a little bit during the day. During the day, it's more like a fly line or sinker rig type thing, at least in my experience, or like a smaller butterfly jig, or not butterfly, but flat fall, something like that, or like a Colt Sniper. But this is the rod and reel that I run. As far as line goes, my rule of thumb for all line on all my rods and reels, if you hook a big tuna, you want the line capacity, okay? I would try to stick with 65-pound test for any kind of bluefin setup, 65 and over, 65, 80, 100, something like that. But I'm going to want 500 yards of line. That's how I pretty much figure out what size reel I'm going to use. Is I want a reel that's going to hold at least 500 yards of line, so that way I don't have to worry about getting spooled, or if there's a tangle and I got to cut a little bit of line off, something like that. Tangles happen. It's notorious, out here on the West Coast. But that's the rule of thumb I like, 500 yards, and then make sure you can put heavy enough line. A lot of the reels come with, markings on the box, or you can just look up the specs on the, company's website. So do your research before you buy a rod and reel that'll hold enough line of the right line size for you. One thing to touch on is Speedmaster is 2-speed reel. I don't use it too often, but sometimes you get a big girl next to the boat and you have to put that thing in low gear and just wind on it. It does have that 2-speed option. And a lot of my other videos, I've been using a spinning rod. So this is a older model Shimano Travala rod, 5'8" again, extra heavy. That's 2Xs. I use the heaviest rod that they offer. This one has been awesome for me, grouper fishing, bluefin tuna, yellowfin tuna, anything like that. So I really like the spinning rod. I've caught a lot of fish on it, especially if the fish are a little bit of smaller grade. I think the spinning rod is a better option, but it's completely up to you guys. So I'm running a Shimano Sargosa. I run Shimano Sargosas on all of my reels, or for all my spinning reels, I should say. For the size, it's 25,000, 80-pound test. It's got right over 500 yards on it. Drag pressure, both of these reels have a max drag of up to 44 pounds. So that's something to take into consideration too, is you don't want to buy a reel and have too light a line on it because you're trying to hit that line capacity rule, but then you can't actually put some good pressure on those fish if you got to wind them up out of a tangle, or just, you hook a big one. You want to be able to put a lot of pressure on them and get them to the boat. I use this rod and reel for jig setups. Again, you can use it for fly line or sinker rig. It's both of these rods have different options or techniques that you can rig them with. Typically I have like one rod with, like, say, a 500 gram jig and another rod with like a 300 gram jig. That way I kind of have some options, and I'm looking around the boat to seeing what is working or what the guys are catching fish on. Moving into casting, I've got a Shimano Terramar. It's a heavy rod, 8 foot, Power Pro 40 to 80, mono 30 to 60. Moderate fast. I kind of like a 7-foot rod better than an 8-foot rod. It's like an 8-footer, dude. It's a pain in the ass to move around my house, pain in the ass to move around the truck, all that kind of stuff. Jamming the tip into like everything. But I do like this rod because it's a little bit longer than the 5'8" Travalas that I'm running, so I can cast like a fly line sardine, or I can cast like a Shimano Colt Sniper, topwater, anything like that. I do have a little bit lighter line on this reel. It's got 65-pound Power Pro. It's not metered braid, because typically I'm just using it for topwater stuff, where I don't really have to keep track of the line depth that it's sinking to or something like that. I'm just casting it out, winding it in, letting the sardine do its thing. Again, Shimano Sargosa, and it's 18,000. You can use 20,000. If you think you're gonna have a multi-use, like if you were gonna only pick one rod and reel, I'd probably go with a shorter Travala, extra heavy or extra heavy. It's really not that much of a difference between the extra and extra heavy. But if you could only have one, I would say the spinning rod, extra heavy, and maybe a little bit bigger model so you could cast a sardine if you wanted to. The 5'8" will cast a sardine, but you're just not going to get out as far as, say, like a 6'6" to 8-foot rod. And then, I'm going to run 80-pound braid most of the time. If you only had to have one, that's what I would do. I'd probably go with something that can hold 500 yards of 80-pound Power Pro spinning rod combo. That way you can cast, you can drop a jig, you can do anything with it. I think that's probably the most like universal rod and reel that I have, that I could use for just about any application. A lot of guys use conventional stuff. Nothing wrong with it. It's just like the style out here on the West Coast. It's definitely works. If you hook a big tuna, you're definitely going to want something you can like lay on the rail and just wind in. These rods are a little bit lighter, so you don't have like that leaning on the rail as much. Because of the shorter rod, it doesn't have as much room to lay that rod on the rail and work it up and down like a lever. Hopefully this helps. If you guys have questions, hit me up. This is just what has worked well for me. Again, I get a lot of kind of controversy, right? But about what is supposed to work, or like the traditional method. This is just what I like to use. It's not the only way to get it done. Hopefully you guys can maybe pick out one or two things, add it to your tackle box, and maybe catch a couple extra bluefin tuna from my experience of what I like. Until next time, guys, catch you on the water. Later.